All right, from the studio in Fairfax City, we are very grateful that Peter Nicholls accepted our invitation to our show. Peter, welcome to my humble podcast.
Thank you, Claudio. Nice to be with you.
No, no problem. Thank you. Let's go back to the beginning in your life, Peter. Were you born like in a musical family at all?
Not at all. No, there is no history of musicians or performers in my family, so I don't really know where all this came from, to be honest. My mother and father were very kind of traditional people. As far as I'm aware, there were no aspirations amongst family members to be on the stage or to do anything publicly. My dad was a teacher. So I don't know where it came from. I think it's just a passion that I had. I kind of started buying records when I was about 10, and it was just a passion that developed. I became quite a furious collector, and still am to a point. It was just a thing that I was really interested in. I was always interested in kind of the arts, the music, and art and writing more than sciences. I was lousy at sciences at school. Chemistry and physics meant absolutely nothing to me. So I was always on the arts side. But even at school, I mean, there was a drama society and all of that sort of stuff, and I was never a part of any of that. I never had any aspirations to appear on stage. That all kind of started when I was about 17, 18. Suddenly that interest in music seemed to progress to wanting to perform. And I'm still kind of an uncomfortable performer to this day. I'm not naturally at ease in front of people, but I cope with that by pretending to be somebody else on stage.
I got you. I got you. Were you in any band at all with your friends in high
No,
school? Nothing.
no, not at all. Not at all. This all started in 1976, which is when the previous year I'd been to see Genesis on the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, and that kind of blew my mind. I was really into the album, and I think it's probably still my favorite album of all time. It's the one that it was a pivotal album for me, and it was one that kind of opened a lot of doors, as you will see. And so I'd seen the Lamb, and then the following year it was the Trick of the Tail tour, and I'd gone on my own to a Genesis concert in a town called Stafford, which is I guess it was about an hour or so from where I was living at the time. So I would have been 17 years old, and just seeing Genesis on that tour was the most important thing. So I just went by myself, and sitting outside the hall in the afternoon waiting for the doors to open, I happened to meet two guys from Southampton, which was down in the south of England. They travelled from Southampton to Stafford. I travelled from Manchester to Stafford, and we just happened to be sitting not far from each other outside, waiting for the doors to open. And these guys turned out to be Mike Holmes and his friend Neil Hayden. So this is next year. That's 50 years ago. So we've been, lifelong friends, really. And Mike and I started writing to each other. Initially, I think it was to swap bootleg tapes. But we embarked on a really intensive letter writing relationship. And in the course of those letters, very, very early on, it became apparent that Mike was a guitarist, and all he wanted was to form a band. And there must have been something that kind of like a light bulb moment for me, where I said, well, that's interesting because I'm a singer, which was absolutely untrue. There was no basis, in fact, for that at all. But I think I must have just recognized with Mike that there was an important person there who'd come into my life, and my life changed significantly from that moment. And so Mike and I started writing, and we started exchanging ideas for concerts and stuff. And so a band developed from that, which was called The Lens. but I was terrified of singing, and I would go to Southampton essentially for rehearsals, but I was so afraid that what came out of me was going to be awful that I just didn't sing. So I was kind of the non-singing vocalist in the Lens. And so consequently, the Lens became a mostly instrumental band, and I really did nothing. And I was sort of a nominal member of the band for, I guess, 3 years or something like that. And then the Lens folded, and IQ arose from the ashes of the Lens. And then I met Mike subsequently and joined IQ, and that was in 1982.
You got it. Wow, what a story.
Yeah. It is a story. I mean, it's an incredible story, and that whole thing. I mean, I've said this many, many times, and apologies to anybody who's heard this story and heard me say this before, but the fascinating thing I think about meeting Mike and Neil that day was it could very easily, for one thing, not have happened at all. We could have been sitting further apart and would never have met. And also, we could have met, but then it could have ended on that day. You know, you meet people all the time and you have no further contact with them. But for some reason, that contact was established, and it became a life-changing moment in my life. And it became, you know, like I say, a friendship that's been, in many ways, the bedrock of my life for all these years.
For you, a sort of personal question, if you don't mind. You were like a very, or you still are, perhaps like a very introvert, right, person, and you didn't want to open up or show on stage, and you knew the lyric. You have lyric in your pocket, right? But you were perhaps afraid to sing then, or perhaps for people think about, hey, this guy is not a great singer or this or that. But something changed in you, right? Eventually, I suppose you say, well, either I want to do it or I don't, right? So, you know, nobody forcing me to think or be here with this guy and have a mic in front of me, right? So you do the risk and you open up, I suppose.
I guess the path to being in the band for me was through acting. I did a drama course for 3 years, and again, I don't really know why I did that. I'm not the kind of person who naturally wants to stand in front of people. But there was something, I guess, with the psychology of acting. You get to hide behind other characters. You get to be other people. Maybe I was trying to find myself via other identities. I don't know. But I did that course for 3 years, and the intention was then to, I guess, try to pursue a career as an actor. But the music thing was at the back of my head the whole time. And I think my main problem with acting was that I would be speaking other people's lines that somebody else had written. I would be directed where to stand and how to perform. And I felt for myself, I wanted to be more in control of what I was doing. And I think for me, being in the band was the best way to encompass all of my interests. I was able to perform. I was able to write the words that I was singing. I was able to be a part of the music. I was able to do the artwork for the album covers. So it kind of it fulfilled all my desires at the time, really, to help me to be more in control of what I wanted to do. But you're right. I mean, I think, and it's not unusual for performers to be quite introverted people, and they kind of hide behind this facade of, you know, a slightly more exaggerated, more confident version of yourself that you present to people. And I think that's still kind of the case today. I'm more at ease on stage now than I ever used to be, but I'm still essentially pretending to be somebody else most of the time.
I got it. I completely understand that. I'm very shy myself, and now I'm talking to people all over the world.
Well,
and the world, of course, to be assumed, right? We are not face to face, right? So it helps.
You know, the world has become a smaller place, and you know, for all its inherent dangers and problems, the internet has transformed everybody's lives, really.
Absolutely. My understanding is you, of course, you were heavily involved with the graphic design for a lot of early IQ records. How did you get involved with that? I mean, you were a kid, like you always was, you know, drawing stuff, and
Yeah. As
A
a
pen
kid,
of
I was a big fan of the American comic books, Marvel comics and stuff, and I was always drawing. I was always copying the artwork from the comics. I had piles of comics around me and books and pens. So art was always the abiding interest for me, really. And um, I went to art college before I did the drama thing. So for me, the art was always a huge part of what I was going to do. And then, as I say, I kind of got sidetracked into the drama thing. To this day, I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it was necessarily a good move, but anyway, that was many hundreds of years ago. So when it came to doing the artwork for the first IQ album, I I just kind of assumed that I would do it, and I think it was good to have somebody within the band trying to depict pictorially, graphically, what was happening in the music. And also, it was cheaper to get me to do it than to get an outside artist in. So it was cheaper and quicker for me to do it, and that's really why the original album, the artwork is in black and white, because it was cheaper for us to reproduce that way.
I got it. I got it. My understanding is you guys used to go to and perform at the Marquee Club at the time, which was the place to be if you want to be a musician. Which now the Marquee Club doesn't exist anymore. I think it is a
No, it
black
doesn't.
outside, and somebody bought the building, and there's offices. I've been there many times, but many of course legendary bands played at early days there.
Yeah, you're right. I
Yeah.
mean, we in the early days of the band, we were living in London. So, and
Yeah.
I'd moved down from Manchester. I think towards the end of 1982. I joined IQ in June 82. Well, that was my first gig with the band, and so the Marquee was our home gig, really. And at the time, there were a few other bands playing the same kind of music, and I think it was all viewed with certain suspicion by the media, and they created this idea of a progressive rock revival. And bear in mind that when we were starting out, progressive rock was not a popular kind of music at all. We were criticized in the press for playing this kind of music. It was seen as being old-fashioned and finished. It'd been swept aside by punk rock. That's the myth. But actually, it hadn't at all. And it just meant that a lot of the bands that were doing that kind of music, that were interested in playing prog, they'd just kind of gone underground, really. And so early 83, we were aware of other bands. And the Marquee became the focus for most of these bands. That seemed to be the place where everybody wanted to play. And you're right, it was an amazing venue on Wardour Street. We played many times there, and it was always a great joy and a great experience to play there. It's a tiny place. It held about 400 people, but I think they always managed to squeeze a few more in. But it just had that indefinable atmosphere that you want in a venue, and everybody travelled for miles, and then they were getting trains home afterwards and reaching home at 4 a.m. But when you're young, when you're in your early 20s, you don't think twice about that. You just do it. And I think we played 9 support gigs at the Marquee before we got our first headline, and that was in September 83. So we served our apprenticeship. We learned our craft, and we I think we made a good account of ourselves in those days. And there were other bands, and there was some kind of competition, I guess, but it wasn't. I don't remember it being an unpleasant competition. We were all kind of fairly mutually supportive. We all supported each other. We played at the Marquee supporting 12th Night and Palace and Pendragon and all these bands. So if they were afraid of us, they wouldn't have given us those support slots. So everybody was trying to achieve the same goals. Some bands got there earlier than other bands. Some bands had greater success than other bands. But a lot of these bands are still in existence now, and it's great to see this is their calling in life. And in a way that the success, what's perceived as success, isn't the goal. It's playing the music that you genuinely love to do. And so my kind of thing is, at the time when we were kind of castigated for playing prog rock, my feeling was, well, it's it's not in fashion, so it can't really go out of fashion. And I think, you know, we've kept going even at a time in the 90s when prog was kind of a lost cause in some ways. You know, we still carried on. A lot of bands like us were still carrying on. But now there's a kind of a greater acceptance of it, I think, and people actually see prog as being slightly cool, almost. But you know, there's a greater acceptance of it now, and things like the Prog magazine in the UK, that's kept going for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the beginning, you say, well, you were supporting other band, and then eventually you became the headliner. So that was the other way around. You know, other bands were, you know, opening the gig for
Yeah.
you and so forth. So, you know, everybody, but it's still nowadays, you know, IQ is still around and touring all the world, the Marillion of this world, the Pendragon of this world, so forth. So even 50 years out, you know, independent of what the media thought about prog rock, it's still, you know, it's a living thing. And
It absolutely is a living thing, and I think what's interesting is that, you know, what's become evident is that there's room for all the bands to coexist.
absolutely.
We're not stealing audiences from each other. We're not kind
Right.
of trying to compete for the same audiences.
Mm.
Bands, as it turns out, can appeal to loads of different people, and
Absolutely.
audiences shockingly can like different bands at the same time. So
Mm.
you know, everybody, there's kind of a level playing field now. Everybody can do their own thing. You know, we're doing the Cruise to the Edge next month, and that will be interesting because, you know, Pendragon are there, Steve Hackett's there, Rick Wakeman, you know, and it's become a kind of a community now, and I'm genuinely interested to see how this works. I don't think there's an air of competitiveness. I don't perceive one. I think everybody is there ultimately playing the same kind of music to the same people, and everybody's having a great time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How difficult was for you guys financially at the time? You know,
Financially,
living in London, putting the first record out there, playing there, Marquee. You didn't have enough money, or yeah,
we had no money at all. We were all on kind of you know, social benefits. We were paying a publicist at the time. Four of us, Mike, Martin, Tim, and I, lived together in a flat, so we had that rent to pay. Any money that we earned from the band just went straight back into the band. We never paid ourselves for doing gigs. For well, that first 3-year period that I was in the band, we never paid ourselves for doing gigs. It all went back into the band, and so we all survived on very little money, hardly any food. You look at photos of us, we're painfully thin because
yeah,
we, you know, we couldn't sustain an extravagant lifestyle. But we did it because we had a belief in what we were doing. It was the only thing we really wanted to do. And back in those days, before the internet, the only way you could progress as a band was through gigging. Nowadays, you can put one song on YouTube and it's seen by several
millions of
thousand
people,
people the
right?
next day. But back in
Mm.
those days, we would play to a handful of people in a gig somewhere in the UK, and we would hope that next time we went back there would be a few more people. And it was a very slow process. But as you say, we there was no money. Everything was done on a shoestring budget. The first album, we had to borrow the money from Paul Cook's dad. He funded the whole thing. And he took a chance, hopeful that we would sell some of the albums, but we sold all of them very quickly. So we felt that we'd done something right. But you're right, we made do with very little in those days financially.
Got it. So no social media, no, of course, Facebook or, you know, Instagram, all the stuff. So how the bands were promoting? I think there used to be some magazine at the time, way before proper, right? Where people
Yeah.
put ad and the melody maker of this world and so on. So forth. Maybe you didn't have enough money to put an ad there, but it was kind of word of mouth to play in this
Well,
venue to fit 100 people and then play the next venue to 100 people, whatever it was.
the initial thing was to try to get the music press to come along and review gigs, because
Okay.
a really simple way of getting people to know that the band existed, and hopefully they would see the name IQ in the gig review section, and if it was a good review, they might be tempted to come along and see us. And that might lead to a feature that might lead to an interview in the newspaper, which didn't happen all that often. There was also Kerrang that was kind of supportive of the prog thing at the time. They featured a Marillion quite a lot. But there was a big community of fanzines. That was very important. And these were just magazines that were put together by people who were enthusiastic about the band and about the bands and wanted to help. So that was a key thing, trying to get gig reviews or interviews in fanzines. But it was a very, very slow process, and you had to really have faith in what you were doing to get through that and to survive all the knockbacks.
I got you. And along the way, I think you not only were you drawing and stuff, but you became like a painter. Is that my understanding as well?
I worked professionally as an illustrator after I'd left the band. I was doing a lot of illustration work for children's comics and books and stuff. That's how I earned my living. I mean, in the early days, I was very happy to do the artwork, and I think my eyes just aren't as good now. So I don't know. The style of artwork that I was doing was that very kind of precise, dotty artwork. I think I would need a magnifying glass and various light sources to be able to do that now. I would still like to do something. There's still a part of me that would like to do another IQ album cover. We shall see. I mean, I have the time now to do it, so you never know. It might happen one day.
Gotcha. I hope so, man. You're very good at what you do. And the first album, Tales from the Lush Attic, I was listening to the music and the last 3 days, and that's a very, very good album, believe it or not, man. A lot of bands at the beginning, they have a hard time, trying to make sense of the music or the coherence, and trying to find a niche, if you will, in that type of music. But the album is very, very good, very, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we hit the ground running. Really, we at the time, everybody was releasing cassette albums, and the natural progression from that was to put something out on vinyl. That was seen as quite a statement of intent, to have something on vinyl. And obviously, we were aware of certain bands that had signed with record companies, and they were putting out vinyl. So we had to kind of compete with that in our own independent way. I think Lush Attic is a great piece of work. I think all the material is very strong. I think we were let down by the fact that we had very, very little time in the studio. Again, it came back to having limited finances, and all we could afford was 1 day for mixing. We had 5 days in the studio, 4 days recording and 1 day mixing. And so there was a lot of stuff in the mix that wasn't right, but Mike was able to correct that. I think it was in 2013. He did a remix of the whole album and was able to make it sound as we would have liked it to sound at the time. And I think Mike's remix is astonishing, really. It really brings that album to life. But you listen to that album now, and everything's so fast. And I don't know if that's because we were conscious of having little time in the studio, or if it was youthful energy. It was probably a bit of both. But you listen to something like Awake and Nervous, and it just seems so fast. Yeah. But I think we had a lot to prove putting the first album out. We had to make our stake in the competition, and we did that, I think, very successfully with the first album.
Actually, it's a beautiful album. Good for you guys. You ended up leaving the band in 1985, right? If you don't mind, what was the motivation or the need for you to leave and the band and find another way to make a living, or find yourself, so to speak? And
it was a complicated time. I mean, we'd done the Wake, and we were doing a tour with Wishbone Ash, supporting them, a national UK tour. So on paper, it was all looking good. But I don't know. I was in a weird place, and I'd kind of backed myself into a corner somehow. I was going through a few things. And I think essentially the problem was that we just didn't talk to each other. We got on with the band and we did all the band stuff, but we didn't really speak to each other on a personal level. And I just kind of reached a point where I thought, something has to give here. I can't keep doing this and not feeling comfortable with it. And I think if we'd had the maturity to just talk together, we could have worked it out probably very quickly. We could have just explained to each other where we were feeling things weren't right, and we could have resolved it very quickly. But I think because we didn't talk, I just kind of reached a point where I had to get out of it. And to this day, I kind of regret doing that, really, because that wasn't the solution. The solution was just to sit and talk and just to be grown-ups with each other. But anyhow, I mean, things happen for a reason, they say. And so I left when I did, and then I came back 4 years later. But I didn't handle that situation well. I wasn't easy to get along with. And to this day, I don't really know what that was all about. I don't think any of us in the band could really fathom what was going on. But at the time, you can only do what you think is right.
Sure.
At the time, I was, 26, and I just kind of thought it was time for me to get out and do something else. But actually, I'm very fortunate in having been given the chance to rejoin the band, and we came together again as friends, which was the most important foundation, I think. And we've never looked back since. So the band is now in its 44th year. IQ 45 next year, which is astonishing. I know, it's crazy, isn't it? But
yeah.
But yeah, the feeling within the band now is very, very good, I think. And like I say, with Mike, I've known him nearly 50 years. These are strong friendships that have lasted the test of time. And I think the band and the crew and our audience, we all have a strong relationship. And I think as you get older, you get to appreciate time more, and you realize that there are fewer years ahead than there are behind. And it's the most important thing is to savor what we have now and to really appreciate what we have. And as I say, the band for me has been a really strong foundation in my life. When my life has gone through weird changes and ups and downs, the band has always been there, and that's a really important thing for me.
Good for you that through music and you keep the friendship. And
yeah, absolutely.
And with all this guy, some people have some easier life than others, but at the end it was a great music that put all of the four or fifth of you together.
It's funny. I kind of think we're a group of friends who happen to be in a great band.
That's right.
Which is a really nice place to be,
Yeah. After when you left IQ at the time, you were involved with another band. Did it go okay with that band as well? And then
no, not really. I mean, that band was called Niadem's Ghost, and I was just trying to do, I guess, something different, something that had a little bit more of an indie vibe to it. And I really enjoyed the music that we did. I had a great time doing that, but it was very difficult, essentially starting all over again. I kind of went right back to the start, and we were playing to handfuls of people, small numbers of people again. And it was very hard, I think, having already done all that with IQ for 3 years to start again with it. Plus, I think the people in the band, we were all quite different. We probably all had different views about what we wanted the band to be. And again, as with the early days of IQ, we had no money to finance it, really. And Niadem's Ghost lasted for a couple of years. I'm proud of what we did. I think musically it was great, and I think maybe we should have spent a little bit longer, tried to make more of a go of it. But after a couple of years, it seemed to have run its course. So, I mean, the music is still there, but it was something that I had to do at the time. And then when that finished, I kind of did a show with IQ in Paris, and for me that was going to be the final part of my career. I hadn't rejoined IQ. I was just a guest for this one-off reunion. They didn't want me back in the band at that point. That wasn't where we were going with it. And so when we finished that show, which was in 1990, for me, that was where it was all going to end. And I was going to go back and join the real world and get a proper job. But then circumstances had other ideas, and we got back together later that year.
Good for you, man. There's another album in between the period between 85 and 90, if I'm pronouncing correctly, Non Samo from 1987, which is it's a very good album as well, more commercial, if you will, because in general, people that don't know, right? You want to do that type of music. Record labels say, "Hey, prog rock is great, but we need hits. We need to sell more records, so make it more commercial viable, so we can recoup our investment that we did in you guys." And sometimes the bands have, okay, let's change a little bit, do a couple track more commercial, so we can promote ourselves better to a different kind of crowd and increase the sale and that kind of stuff. And anyways, it's a great album as well, and I really like that stuff. And so in between the period, there was another singer, and then the person unfortunately was let go, and then you came back, and the rest is history, as they say here in the US.
I mean. It was the end of '89. Paul and Tim decided to leave. I think they at the time kind of wanted to pursue a slightly more, I don't know, commercial mainstream direct. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I mean, Tim, rejoined the band in what was it, 2000? I've got it written down here. 2011. 2011. Tim rejoined the band. So that was. That was a wonderful thing, Tim coming back, But everything has happened in a fluid, organic way, really. Nobody has ever been kicked out of IQ. Everybody who has left and rejoined, as most of us have done so of their own choice. It's never been a case of people being forced out of the band. People have just left because they, for whatever reason, it wasn't right for them anymore. But the band has successfully continued all of these years now. And obviously we've had several lineup changes, several significant lineup changes, but I would say the band is the strongest it's ever been right now. I think the lineup that we've had since Tim rejoined and Neil joined, this has been a very harmonious and productive lineup for the band.
Gotcha, perfect. You guys are well known from using, for in general for the live show in terms of putting a visual show as well, and that has become an integral part of IQ when you use projection and lighting effect and that kind of stuff, which is visually appealing, right?
And this kind of really goes back to when Mike and I first started writing to each other. Because I've kept all those letters, and I was reading through them the other day. And very early on, when we're both 17 years old, we're both talking about ideas for live shows and how to present things visually. So I think that was always there. Particularly with Mike, it's always been something that he's very, very interested in, having the screens and the projections. And so I think the idea of presenting the band, presenting the music visually has always been part of our DNA, really. We've often not had the finances to be able to do that in the early days. I think we had one strobe on stage that we'd bought, and that was our one lighting effect that we had. That was just in one track. So we had very humble beginnings in terms of visual presentation, but it has always been part of what we wanted to do, definitely.
Perfect. I understand. Feel free to elaborate on what sparked the story of that eventually became Subterranea, which is another obscure great album.
An obscure great album. Yeah, I think at that point we just reached a decision where we wanted to present the band differently. Again, with the visual thing, that show was designed very much as a theatrical show. It wasn't a gig as such. It was more of a musical piece.
Yeah.
So we played the whole album from start to finish. I didn't introduce any songs. I kind of stayed in character for the whole time. So it's quite a demanding thing for the audience, I think, particularly in the early
Yeah.
shows when people didn't know the music particularly well at that point. You know, we played the whole album from start to finish without any break, without any interval or anything. But people really enjoyed I think the ambition of that show. And in order to do that, we had to have the best part of 2 hours worth of new music, which is why Subterranea became this double album concept thing. And you know, for me, the joy of that was, it was a group of people working together, and I like being part of a group. I like being, you know, one of the ideas people in a group of people, and it could not have worked without the input of all the people, the band and the crew and everybody. It was a real joint venture to make this thing work, and for me, it was just a great experience to be a part of that. And I still think it was an amazing piece of work, and it kind of defined us in many ways. I think people still talk very fondly of the Subterranea show and the album itself. You know, I think we did some great work at that time, and we still are doing amazing things. I think the new album is
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think Dominion is. I genuinely think it's amongst the best things that we've done. A few people have said to me it might even be their favorite album, and I think for us to get that kind of reaction after 44 years,
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
brilliant. It's not like people just want to hear The Wake or Lush Attic.
That's right. Yeah.
People embrace and accept and enjoy all the subsequent albums, you know, and people are happy for us to be doing new music, and they enjoy the new music that we do now.
I'm great that you mentioned that, because as we get older, right? People, whether you're an engineer or a painter, a musician, whatever, you begin losing the interest and the motivation, and we go to crisis. But you guys, every album after the next, moving to a higher level, as if like what expression they use, like an old wine that it gets gets better with it, you know.
Yeah,
After
we're a very old wine now. Yeah, I think the aim with any album is to improve on what you've done before, because why, if you're going to put out something that's not as good as your last album, why bother to do that? So we've always tried to kind of maintain a higher standard each time, and you know, I always think the album is the thing, really, because that's what will survive when we've gone. You know, the music will still be there, and I think we always try really hard to make each album a progression from the previous one. And this is probably why it takes us a long time to do them, because we have quite a high quality threshold. There's a lot of stuff that gets rejected. For Dominion, we recorded probably another album's worth of material that didn't make it onto the album. So we always select the music very carefully. We only choose the best bits. And yes, it's important, I think, to make each album as purposeful and decisive as it can be. You want to make a bold statement each time. You want to just say, we're still here. We've still got stuff to say. And even now, you know, like I say, we've already tentatively started talking about the next album, which I think we're not finished yet. Some bands are calling it a day. Some artists are retiring and stuff, but IQ we've still got a way to go yet.
Good for you. You get the material that is written it doesn't go in a particular record because the threshold is high. You guys revisit the stuff. I mean, it's stored somewhere, the hard drive and computers. You guys go back to old stuff. And, hey, we didn't use this piece for that particular record, but maybe we should, retrieve it and rearrange it and change it or whatever, make it better, whatever that is, and kind of
I mean, I think the stuff that we recorded this time, it will appear in some form. It won't get lost forever.
got it.
We do tend to, we do go revisit older ideas, but I mean, Mike is a very, very prolific writer. I think he just has music in his head the whole time. And so there's never any shortage of new ideas for IQ music. He's always got something new going on in his head. And so we're very fortunate in that respect, that we're never struggling to find new things to do. In fact, the challenge is to kind of to keep up with what Mike presents sometimes. But I remember when we were doing Subterranea, I had back in the old days when we had cassettes, and we were talking about doing it as a double album. I'd put together a cassette of stuff that we'd never used, and I was basically saying to the band, there's 90 minutes of music here that we've never used. We can repurpose this, and we can develop it and make it so that we've got enough material for a double album. And all of that material that we'd never used was still never used. None of it appeared on Subterranea. So I think at the time when you're writing for an album, you're kind of more interested in the new things that come along rather than something that didn't quite make the grade 5 years ago. There's not really a great impetus in revisiting stuff that wasn't good enough back then. I think when we're writing, it's always more exciting to work on new ideas. But we do revisit old things occasionally and revive old ideas, but it doesn't happen a huge amount, I don't think.
Yeah, or maybe like a deluxe version where, hey, that was presented, and this one would never use it for the fans.
Yeah,
we put easy for me to say. We put that. Martin at the time, I don't know what year, but he, the bachelor of the keyboardist Martin Orford. I imagine that because he was an important part of the band, affected the creativity of the process, I suppose, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, Martin was a hugely influential member of the band. Yeah, we were very sorry to see him go. When he left, which was during the recording of the Frequency album, I think he just had enough. I think he just felt it was time for a change. Personally, I know he had an issue with the way people were consuming music. He wasn't a fan of downloading and stuff. As I say, people sometimes reach a point where IQ isn't for them anymore, and we tried to make him stay. We wanted him to stay, but he was quite determined to go. And I have to say, it's lovely that he's playing with Jadis now, and they've done a new album and they're out doing gigs, and it's great to see that he's out doing that, because he's a huge talent, Martin, and his departure from the music business as it was at the time was a very sad loss, I think. So it's great to see that he's still, producing new music and still playing live. I'm really pleased to see that.
Yeah. Well, what's your take in general term about, I don't know, Spotify, Bandcamp, people using just listen to MP3 file versus buying a CD or vinyl or whatever. I mean, Spotify is a ripoff, I suppose, right? You need to have like a million hits to get a check for $10 to buy a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
The other hand is great marketing for expose your music, but you don't get any money, right? So
yeah, I think I'm probably old school in the sense that I still like to go and buy a CD or an album.
Yeah.
I still like the physical product, and because we take a lot of care over the physical product that we release. I still have that sensibility where I like to hold the thing in my hand. And I think you can download endless music. You can just listen on Spotify, as you say. But I kind of think, where's the fun in that? And I think when we put an album together, and Mike would say this, the order of tracks is very important. The journey that you take the listener on is very important from start to finish. You want to try and keep somebody interested and entertained for however long it might be, 50 minutes or something, So the sequencing of the tracks is very important, and I think it's a shame when people just choose tracks from Spotify. That whole aspect of the journey that you want them to go on is lost because they might just choose
Absolutely.
tracks 2, 4, and 7.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
and so I think it's a great shame that the integrity of the album experience is lost in that way. I still very much, if I'm listening to an album, I have to listen to the whole thing. I think in deference to the person who created it, they created it as an album to be listened to. So I want to hear the whole thing all the way through. Obviously, everybody has favorite tracks, but I think it's a shame that people don't necessarily want to have the physical product anymore. But I think we're very fortunate in the prog world that prog fans do support the artists and do like to have the physical products.
Yeah.
You know, we put all the albums, we're reissuing all the albums on vinyl, and they sell out very, very quickly. People like to have the physical product still, so that's a great thing. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe old people like us still like to have the thrill of holding a new album. You know, maybe that's just maybe that's just something that's in our bones now.
Yeah.
But I personally, my preference is to always buy the CD or buy the vinyl.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. You know, opening up and then you're sitting on the turntable and you listen to stuff and you take a look at the picture and the lyrics and all the appropriate documentation, and it's beautiful. As opposed to, it's with the internet and people now, they don't have the attention to do anything in life. They listen 10 second next, 10 second next, 10 second.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. It's a weird, very strange way to live, I suppose. What's the
But
point
like you say, that thing of opening an album, if it's a gatefold sleeve, I had that when I was 17, and I still have that now.
Yeah.
Immersing yourself in that world that's been created.
Yeah. No, absolutely. In general, when you're writing lyrics, or all of you wanna write new music, where the ideas come from? In other words, do you go to a supermarket or go for a walk, or whatever you do, and then ideas come to your head? Man, I thought about I saw an advertisement in television that that part of a line that will be great to do. I will write it down. Or you go to a supermarket and I hear some electronic music in the background. We can use a little bit to do this. And how the concept ideas get into your head. You write it down or that kind of stuff.
Do you mean lyrically?
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, I think ideas can come from anywhere. As you say, you can often be walking along, you hear a snatch of conversation, you see something on a wall, and you think, "Oh, that's a nice phrase."
Yeah.
And I have a little book that I kind of jot things down in. Musically, all the ideas start with Mike. He presents demos, and I think for me, writing lyrics, my aim has always been to try to write something that people connect with on an emotional level, I guess. And I think that's happened quite noticeably on this album. I think I've written in a slightly more direct way, because it's always nice when people say that a certain song has helped them through a dark time, or the lyric has resonated with them. So I think I had that very much in my head this time. But I think when I'm writing lyrics, obviously they have to match the mood of the music.
Right.
And the aim is to make it feel like the music and the lyrics have come from the same place, that they belong together. So that's always my aim, I think, is to kind of to have something that people will recognize as a feeling that they've experienced themselves. So on this album, there's a certain amount of I guess reference to loss. My mother died 2 years ago, so I've referred to that, and everybody has lost somebody. So everybody knows that feeling, and it's not it's not a unique thing to write a song about, but it is a universal thing. But I mean, when I'm writing lyrics, they go through so many changes. I just start with any old rubbish, and it takes me a long time to get to a finished lyric. But I kind of my personal feeling is, well, I get to write the lyrics for an album every once every, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. So I want to make the most of that opportunity and do my best work.
Good for you. My understanding is the new album, the vinyl, will be released on March 28th, right? Which is in 10 days from now, right? And I have heard when I was doing research for this interview, some reviews are there, people commenting about the new album coming out, and I think you guys mentioned that, as you say before, it's going to be another great album as usual, So
hopefully, yeah.
Looking forward to listen to the album as well, and buying it, of course. Because the last album, Resistant, was 6 years ago. So every 5 years, you guys get together again and then put great music. Every time. Good for you, man. Good for you.
Well, I'm fairly confident that you won't have to wait 6 years for the next one.
Well, I hope so.
I think we're aware of time passing, and we have there's a momentum within the band at the moment, and we want to make the most of these years that we have. So I don't think it will be a 6-year wait for the next album. I think it will appear before then.
But that would be great. Fans all over the world. Well, listen, you are going to be touring. I think the tour start in let's see now. Very soon, actually. You go to Spain.
Yeah, well, we're touring now. Next week we're in Spain.
We just came back.
Yeah, we just came back from Scandinavia last week. I've got a week off, and in fact, on Wednesday, 2 days from now, I set off to Spain.
Yeah.
So it's a busy year for IQ. We're doing a lot of work this year, more than we have done for a long time.
That's great. And then, of course, cruise to the Edge in April.
Yeah.
And then you go to Ghana a couple of times, and then you go to UK, Germany, and so forth. And I have several friends in South America since I was born in that area. People love your music in South America, man. Argentina, Chile, people staff have great memories of the time you guys played there.
Yeah, we had a lovely time when we played there. I mean, it was several years ago now, but they were very enthusiastic and very nice people.
Yeah. My friend Andres Valle, I don't know if you remember, he's from Buenos Aires, Argentina. He said hello as well. No. He's one of the guy who organized the show when you were there in Buenos Aires. I don't know how many years ago, but people in Latin America really love prog rock and that type of music.
They do, yeah, you're quite right, yeah. Yeah. I think people who like prog stay loyal to it, which is
absolutely right.
An amazing thing, and people that followed IQ for many years. I think it's because it has been a difficult thing to admit to liking. People stay loyal to it, and even secretly,
That's right.
But yeah, prog fans are very loyal and very supportive, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah, that's great. The best kept secret, probably.
Best kept secret in music. Yeah.
People like prog rock, but there's a market for everybody. People like country music, rock, and it's
absolutely.
Always, that's which is great. That's some people like certain type of painting, certain type of books, and certain type of music, which is great. Peter, it was very nice talking to you. Good luck to you. Hopefully, I will see you very soon, and hopefully meeting you one day personally. And your music is great, and you're doing a great work, even after 40 or 50 years, whatever that is. A lot of great music.
I think we're starting to get the hang of it now.
That's right. It was very nice talking to you, Peter. Good luck to you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. No problem. Take care. Bye-bye.